Mason Graham, thank you so much for joining me on New Mexico in Focus.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Now, we're going to talk about modernizing the legislature today. It's something we've been following for years. I know I've spoken with you before on the show about this. But can you start by laying out the mission of your group, Common Cause New Mexico, and how modernization efforts fit into it?
So, with Common Cause New Mexico, we've always been focused on government accountability, transparency, and overall improving the structure of government so that it better serves the people. So, with modernizing, what we're really talking about is creating a more efficient process of legislating and governing that somewhat aligns with what other states do. So, as many know, here in New Mexico, we have a very short session. For a period of time, legislators did not have their own staff member, and they are essentially all volunteers, so they don't receive any compensation. So, in this current legislative session, we've been working on a Senate joint resolution that would have created an independent commission that would have the ability to set and limit legislator salaries. This has been something that's brought up many times in the past, even over the last several decades. It's a constitutional amendment, so it would go before the voters. But really, the goal is to try to create a legislature that is capable. You know, many of our legislators have full time jobs. We're called a citizen led legislature for that reason. So when they are not in session, or even some of them during session, they're working that full time job as well. And then outside of session, there's been some studies that show that our state representatives and our state senators spend about 20 hours a week doing legislative responsibilities, and all of that goes unpaid. In addition, there is a financial barrier to even wanting to be a legislator or somebody who comes from a community, that has a lot of challenges, and they say, I want to be somebody who can serve my people in this way. Once they realize that there's no compensation, they may be barred from that opportunity. So we think that creating this independent salary commission would open up opportunities for people who want to serve, and then overall relieve some of that financial burden on some of our legislators.
Okay. Now, you talk about that resolution to create the Citizen Commission that would then figure out what paying lawmakers would look like. Um, what are the chances right now that that passes? Are you thinking that it's positive at this point?
Well, things aren't very positive, but I'll keep a positive spin on it.
Okay.
So it was introduced early. It was Senate Joint Resolution 1. So we started in the Senate for this constitutional amendment that would create the Independent Salary Commission. It did get two committee hearings, and in that second hearing, it actually landed on a tie vote, 5-5, with actually some Democrats siding with the Republicans voting no against it.
All right. And I just want to remind our viewers and listeners that we're taping this on Tuesday. Um, so while we're here, and just so viewers who might be less familiar with this general debate, not just paying lawmakers, the push to modernize something very much implies that the thing that is being modernized is antiquated. How should folks think about that dynamic when it comes to the New Mexico legislature? Are we in 2025 antiquated?
I would say so, absolutely. And I think that is reflected by some of the biggest challenges in our state. Every session we go in with a lot of things on our mind, particularly the rate of crime, poverty, the rising issues in regards to climate change. And our legislators are really pressed for time to bring those issues and solutions to the table during session. But like I mentioned before, outside of session, they're not being compensated for any of the work that they do. So the research, the working with organizations, finding the solutions, traveling to other places like conferences where they can hear from some of their other colleague legislators in other states, they're not being compensated for. So only those who have the financial stability to take those opportunities are doing so. And some of the others, may have to put some of these legislative responsibilities to the wayside, not holding, constituent services and holding town hall meetings, and then the lead up to legislative session as well. There's a lot of challenges for citizen-led legislature here in New Mexico, and we're not the only ones, but we are the only ones that go uncompensated. That, in addition to our short session length, one of them being entirely controlled by the call of the governor. I believe it really puts us behind on finding some of these real solutions, and modernizing may be a way to just give them a little bit of a push to really have more capacity as a legislator.
You've kind of laid it out a little bit, but if lawmakers were to be paid, obviously that's a ways down the line, even if this commission is approved. How might that change the makeup of the legislature? Is there any concern um, that we might create an environment where career politicians are governing us and they aren't as tied into the community?
Well, I'd argue that we already have career politicians, and many of our legislators right now have served for decades. I think the most recent legislator that has stepped down served for about like 40 years or so. And the people who are able to do that are those that are financially stable. They're very resourceful. They're in a district that may have some insulation as far as challenges to their incumbency. So they don't have to worry about things like being challenged or competition in their district. They don't have to worry about the financial burden on them if they go to session every year and the work that they do. And a lot of them also are retired, so they don't have an additional job that they need to keep up with. So all of those things combined allow them to be a quote unquote career politician, as in the work that they do is entirely revolves around being a legislator or being in politics. That is kind of a dirty word, but it's not a bad thing to have somebody who has the experience, the institutional knowledge, and knows how to govern and knows how to administrate and knows how to be a legislator, pass good laws, and strike down ones that are bad. We would love to see legislators not only just stay in their seat, but to gain that institutional knowledge over time. Unfortunately, right now, with the fact that they are an unpaid legislature, many legislators are coming in serving 1 or 2 terms and saying, "This isn't sustainable for me. This isn't sustainable for my family. There's a big burden on myself and my loved ones, and they have to balance whether or not doing this role as a legislator is worth it." And unfortunately, that's the reality. It really shouldn't be. Someone shouldn't have to choose between serving their state and serving their community and also taking care of their family, because they can do those things in other avenues. But unfortunately, as it is right now, if you want to be a legislator, you do have to have some of those things like, good wealth, or financial stability, and a semi-flexible job that allows you to go up to the legislature for 30 days or 60 days.
Right.
So those things don't always come available to everybody, and we think that they should.
Now, the influence of lobbying in the legislature has been a topic of interest for us on the show for a while now. Lobbying exists in every hall of government in this country. We know that. But how is it different in New Mexico, given we have a citizen-led legislature?
So lobbying is no stranger to common cause. That's kind of how we started up, was to play the role of the citizen lobbyist amongst all of these private interest groups. New Mexico is very unique in this way because we do not have a paid legislature. So a lot of our legislators do rely on the input, the research, and the work that lobbyists do and that they bring to the table. They let them know what bills are going to be really important and really consequential, and help them understand exactly what it is that they are voting on. Some of our lobbyists, do have private interests from other groups like, oil and gas or the NRA or education. There's a large spectrum of the types of lobbyists. But I think what is important for people to know is that when someone is doing lobbying activities, it's not always in the interest of a private group, but there is also public interest as well, which is some of the work that we do at Common Cause, to speak on behalf of the public interest. And because our legislators are very pressed for time in and outside of the legislature, groups and lobbyists can come together and kind of fill in those gaps.
Now, you're also backing a bill that would allow voters who aren't registered with a major party the opportunity to vote in primary elections. That's Senate Bill 16. It passed its first House committee on Monday. That would be March 2nd. What's the reasoning behind that idea?
So in New Mexico, the largest political party is actually not a political party at all. It's the decline of state voters. That number is actually growing a lot in recent years. Here in New Mexico, I believe it's about 30% of registered voters are decline of state, and they're completely barred from primary elections that are only Republican or Democrat. Now, they do end up going to the general election and voting on one of these candidates anyway, but in that primary election, there's quite a bit of consequence for who people are voting for, who it is that they see has is carrying their values, and if they are going to be on that general election ticket, whether or not they want to vote for them. So, because we are in a closed primary system, only if you are a registered Democrat or if you're a registered Republican, you have the ability to vote for those primary candidates. Luckily, in New Mexico, we kind of have a half step, which allows you to same day register for either the Democrat or the Republican Party to receive that party's primary ticket. What Senate Bill 16 seeks to do is kind of just remove that half step and allow folks to receive the ballot of their choosing. We don't have third party candidates, obviously, during primary elections. So that's why it's called a semi open primary. But really just allowing for more voters to come out during primary elections and choosing how they want to be represented in the general.
Now, the assumption is this would boost primary turnout. Is there data to support this? Would this boost primary turnout?
I believe there is data. I mean, we can just look at the number of voters who are declining the state. Now, they do show up for the same day registration, but the process is a little bit complicated. You do have to bring the materials that you need in order to register to vote that day. So sometimes if you show up and you don't have the materials, you can get deterred and maybe not register to vote because you're not uh, prepared. Or in other cases, you don't want to identify with the political party just based off of your morals or your standing point and your viewpoint. So that can also bar people from voting. So overall, we think if we open up the elections, the primary elections to everybody, whether you're declining a state or not, you'll be able to show up and just choose the candidate based off of what you believe in.
Now, I want to wrap up here with a modernization push that we've been following for a while that came through last year when the Legislative Council approved a measure to allow lawmakers a paid staffer. Have you talked to legislators in this session about how that's been working?
Yes, I have. And before the session, I was able to work with quite a few of the new staff members for legislators. From what I understand, it has been very helpful, even in just administrative responsibilities, answering emails, setting up meetings, taking calls, and uh, allowing legislators to have a little bit of breathing room to do some of this important research, and then also be more structured and organized on when they are getting ready for session, when they're outside of session and they need to do constituent services. Legislators have a big role in our state. It's not just passing laws. They can help with things like your passport, or if things are happening in your community that needs attention. Folks do reach out to their legislators often. And when I talk with our state representatives and our state senators, they tell me, that I get thousands of emails, I get hundreds of calls, and I can't take them all. So I know from my experience talking with our legislators is that this staff person has been a very big help for them, even especially when they're not able to physically be there, or if they're not able to be available, the staff person could step in and help them, take some of that weight off of their shoulders.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mason Graham. Appreciate you being on New Mexico in Focus.
Yeah, thanks again.